Hi guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to No Limits, a Mitrap podcast. So what are you up to this week, Mike?
Dude, I'm excited. This is episode 25. I've been waiting for it. How about you?
I've been better. It took me about 15 minutes for my computer to load this Zoom call, but I'm getting there. It's been a busy week.
Yeah. Pretty busy. And you're wrapping up that doctorate, ready to graduate in, couple months?
2 months, 3 months, hopefully.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, as we've been saying for some time, can't wait to have you down here, back in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia region.
I know. I'm excited. But what's more exciting is that we made it to 25 episodes. That's a feat.
I can't believe it. That is a quarter of 100 episodes.
That is true.
And how many books? So we got Term Limits, Transfer of Power, Third Option, then we jumped ahead to
Lethal Agent with 5 books.
Lethal Agent, Total Power, 5 books. And then next month this month, we're in October now, we're covering Separation of Power. So that'll come over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. No, it's been fun doing this with you, so let's keep doing.
Good stuff. Well, today we wanted to celebrate the 25th episode by giving some shout outs to you guys, the listeners. A couple people we've heard from on Twitter and social media, some people who sent us some nice emails. We want to do a extended Twitter roundup and a listener shout out as a way to recognize those who have stuck with us this whole time.
Yes.
After that, we will actually going to wrap up our Total Power discussion. So we really want to get to Separation of Power. But I did have one last interview with somebody, and I thought it's super important to get to you. Now, this person was not able to come on the show to record with us, but I spent over an hour talking to him, and he's a veteran of 37 years in the electric and power utility industry. So this guy could be your real-life power station, the real John Alton out there, and he had some very telling insight on the power grid. I got to say, though, somewhat controversial for fans of Kyle here, because a lot of the questions he answered for me from the inside, an insider's perspective, working for utility companies, went against some of the common knowledge in Total Power. So, we'll bring that to you at the end of this episode, some of the things that he told me about how our grid might be more protected than one might think.
Right. It's been a few weeks since Total Power was released. Hopefully most of you have read it or are in the process of reading it. So now that we've done our podcast on the actual episode, we've had some time to digest, think about it. We, unfortunately, because of stupid marketing people or what would you call the branch that wouldn't allow him to talk?
Oh,
publicity,
like the public affairs
office. The public affairs office, wouldn't allow him to actually speak on record, but off record, he had a nice conversation with Mike, and we're excited to bring that to you.
He actually works now for, I guess you would kind of call it, not necessarily an interest group, not even a lobbying group, but they basically, maybe a think tank, if you will, or maybe it's more regulatory. So I would say almost a national regulatory board that oversees a lot of individual power companies and regional power authorities. And so just because the job took on a national appeal, he was barred from going to the press. And
apparently we're the press.
When he said he can't talk to the press, I was like, well, a podcast about some fiction novels, I don't know if it is classified as press. And he said, well, we just really can't do public interviews, but I can give you some information. I could talk to you, and you can use it for your own knowledge that you might put into the podcast. But he couldn't come on the show due to the constraints of the public affairs office at his job.
Sure.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. But before we get to that, let's do our Twitter roundup, right?
Let's do it. I thought we'd start with this. We launched a contest. We posted a few weeks ago, right when Total Power came out. If you can explain the events of Total Power in exactly 5 emojis, no more, no less. So, Chris, what'd you think of these entries? I sent them to you with no name, so we'll announce the winner. But who was your favorite out of all these 5 emojis for Total Power contest?
All right, so we have my top 3 are, we have one that is a plug, a caution sign, a candle, a coffin, and an American flag. We have one that's a light bulb, then a stop sign, or like a no smoking sign, fire, screaming emoji, and then a skull and crossbones. I like that a lot. And then I guess this one is definitely more like, pretty much sums up the plot. We have an airplane, sheep, which I'm assuming is like when they meet in the barn and discuss it. Then they have the light bulb, and then immediately after the light bulb, they have the candle, and then camping. So, it's kind of 5 emojis was tough. If you could probably combine 2 and get the entire plot, but those are my top 3.
Okay. Well, you want to know who you picked? Your first pick with the plug and the coffin. It's yours truly. You picked our
nice.
own. You picked mine. And actually, I guess we'll have to really shout out the third, because the second one you picked with the light bulb and the screaming and skull and crossbones, the Atrium Mystery Bus, the bus himself submitted that one. So that's, I don't know if that counts. Yeah, that's David's. And which one was your third?
It would be what you sent to me, number 7.
Yes, that with the sheep, I guess, because, or maybe a lamb, whatever that is, because Rap's always talking about eating his animals at the farm. That one, number 7, was, hey, Sarah Walton. Sarah Walton, a great Twitter follower, lots of Rap content. So Chris liked your 5 emojis for Total Power the most out of our listeners.
So we'll be sending you some fresh new stickers.
Yeah, we'll reach out to you on Twitter and we'll get out some new stickers. Speaking of new stickers, I sent you some, Chris. We got a new batch of stickers in, vinyl this time.
Ooh, with the rounded edges.
Rounded edges, vinyl. We went for the nice ones. I was kind of disappointed with our paper stickers last time. That was subpar.
It's all right. We're upgrading. We're growing as a podcast.
We're growing. And thanks to our patrons, we were able to purchase a new round of stickers. So all of our patrons will be sending out in the mail a couple of these new guys, these vinyl stickers, and look out for those in the mail. We want to make sure all our patrons feel appreciated for financially supporting this podcast and what we're trying to do. All right. Any other listeners? What else have you seen on the Instagram side of things?
Right. So yesterday we're recording on October 1st. So yesterday, September 30th, was International Podcast Day. We got a couple shout outs, including one from Sean Crosswords, who shouted us out in support of International Podcast Day. I also got this message from John on Instagram, where he got his stickers in the mail, and he was saying thank you, and he said he's been really enjoyed listening to us, and that he started reading these books just back in May, and he's finished the entire series. He wishes he could have a new Mitrap book every month, which I think both of me and you would agree.
Oh yeah.
So that was nice to hear from you guys. Yeah, and you've also got a couple emails, right?
Yeah, we got some great emails, and if anybody wants to reach out, our email is mitchrappod@gmail.com. And I've been meaning to share this one with you for a while. It really, really meant something to me. Stephen reached out, Stephen H., and he told us about his Mitch Rapp origin story, getting introduced to the series. And he was really excited to hear that there was a podcast. And he was introduced to the series with an audiobook for Consent to Kill from his father, and being legally blind, the audiobooks meant a lot to him. And so really cool that I think one of our favorite books, and I could speak for most fans, one of the most beloved books, Consent to Kill, helped Stephen get into reading Mitch Rapp. And then I love this story. He was taking a public speaking course in college and was assigned to read aloud a book as one of their public speaking assignments. The professor asked it to be a children's book, I guess just as an exercise to sharpen your skills and build confidence. But he told the professor he wanted to do something he was really passionate about, and went out there and pulled a rap and bent the rules a little bit. So
I don't know if Consent to Kill is a children's book.
Yeah, but I think Kennedy would approve of bending the rules. I think that's all right in the rap universe. So
yes,
He went with the epilogue from Consent to Kill, which, man, that is, if we don't want to do spoilers for that book, but if you know the series, the epilogue of Consent to Kill is one of the high points of all Vince Flynn, all Mitch Rapp, but even much of thriller literature. That scene is up there. So really powerful that he used that for his college professor and the class. But even better was, when he was getting ready to graduate later on, the professor of that speech class presented to him a really kind gift. It was a signed copy of The Last Man. Vince's final book before he passed away, and it came in a nice special edition box. And Steven said he holds that gift in high regard. It's on his bookshelf. Anytime he has a chance to talk to someone about books, he always recommends Vince Flynn, and starting with a Mitch Rapp book.
Nice. That's a good story.
Yeah. We also got another email from Jeff D., and he had a really cool story that ties back to Minnesota, in Minneapolis, where Vince is from and where he got Term Limits first spread and published. And he talked about how Vince always appeared on this radio show, the Garage Logic radio show, which was on AM 1500 KSTP. It later became a podcast with the Garage Logic podcast, which I think is still around. But he said he'd listen to the guys on Garage Logic give Vince his first interview every time a new book came out. And so Vince was always on the show. He said he was a laid-back guy, really positive guy, and he would tell stories, such as when he went golfing with Rush Limbaugh, or had dinner with King Abdullah of Jordan, or met Bill Clinton, at a lunch. Jeff is saying that Vince on the radio show did a good impression of Bill Clinton when he met him. But it goes one step further where Jeff, who always admired Vince from listening to him on the radio show and eventually picking up his books, was doing a fundraiser, a golf tournament. And as part of the fundraiser, they were doing an auction. And he thought, hey, let me send a message in Facebook and see if he'll donate an autographed book. Well, Vince said, hey, talk to these people. Just 10 days later, he had an autographed copy of one of Vince's books ready to go in the auction. And it just really meant something that Vince was so open to the fans, willing to hook them up and help out with this charity golf tournament. So, and that was, believe it or not, 3 weeks before Vince passed away. So really right up to the last minute, Vince was connecting with fans, helping out fans, and giving back to all the communities he inspired.
It really shows this guy was, till the very end, just willing to give all he had. Very nice guy.
Yes,
Everything I've heard, talking to different people throughout this entire process, Vince has been, was a great guy. We should really reach out, see if we can talk to like Vince's brother or something.
Yeah, there's so much on the archives too of the website that James runs on vinceflynn.com. I think we can do a tribute to Vince, just digging into some of that, pulling up some of his old interviews and videos, and maybe that's something we can get ready for next year, 2021.
Yeah. Definitely.
Cool.
Better year.
How good is January 1st, 2021 going to feel?
I'm going to get so drunk on New Year's Eve.
Is it just me, or is this going to be the biggest New Year's Eve party in history?
Well, I mean,
ever.
In one sense, no, but in another sense, yes.
I mean, we're going to have the results of the election, we hope, unless it's still contested in the courts at that time. We're going to be moving on from this dreadful year. I don't care what's going on. We're leaving 2020 behind. That's going to be a party, man. It's going to be a party.
You should probably cut that.
I should probably cut that last part. Screw it, though.
All right, so we got one more to share with you. We got Joshua M. You have been doing the limericks for the book reviews, and he commented on your limerick for Term Limits. Said he loved the book, and because you inspired him, he wrote his own limerick. So I'm going to read that for you. Coleman versus Congress, no tears shed. May your aim be true as you fire some lead. Congress has sealed their fate. Flynn has Coleman clean slate. We have Mitch, now a new thread. I like that.
I like it. Someone limericked our limericks. They limericked at us.
We would appreciate more limericks at us. So if any of you reading these books like the limericks, hit us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever.
Yeah,
we'll read them out.
Joshua posted this one on Goodreads, but we got to get some Twitter limericks going for Separation of Power. Next week that's our book. So how about Chris? We need a Chris Furman limerick for Separation of Power. I think it's time.
All right, in 2 episodes, I'll give you I'll work on it. I'm not a poet. I'm a biologist. I'm not a writer. I write facts. So.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, it's been fun. We have so many other followers. We thank you so much for making it to episode 25 with us. We hope you enjoyed this little tribute to some of the fans who reached out. And of course, all the other ones we've spoken to through social media or shared their Mitch-Rap origin stories with us. We thank you for joining us. And that's the reason we want to keep this podcast going and get to the very end of the series.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
All right. What do you say? Let's switch over topics and let's get to our total power discussion.
Yes.
All right.
All right. So, as we said at the top, it's been a few weeks since Total Power. We've talked about it. We've tweeted about it. We've, discussed with other people about it. So, Mike had an opportunity to talk with someone who's an expert in the field, gave him some great insights. And I'm just going to, I don't know what Mike knows. So, I'm going to play the inquisitive reader here and sort of, or, I'm going to back Kyle here and you're going to try to pin him down. Because what you're telling me, what you texted me was that there's some holes.
Yes.
So I'm just gonna start asking you questions. So,
yeah.
I guess, does he think that what was it logical what Power Station did, and could that actually happen? Because we did do a podcast before the book came out where we read, and a lot of what we read, which I believe is like what the research was, the beginnings of the research of what Kyle did, sort of hinted at what we saw in the book. So.
Yeah, well, that was perhaps the most surprising thing when I called up this friend. He's a family friend. He's been working since 1983 in various positions related to the grid. He's an electrical engineer by training, but has also worked in other regulatory positions in addition to continuing to be an engineer for many different utility companies up and down the East Coast. And that was the most striking thing of our conversation. I called him and said, hey, would you be willing to come on the podcast? We read a book about terrorists who take down the U.S. power grid, and we want to know how likely the events in the book are. And so the long and short of it was, he thought this whole thing was Hollywood making up these plots and was not very grounded in reality, if I'm being honest. And so we wanted to bring you the snippets of this conversation and go over it because, like Chris said, we thought and we found a lot of research that Kyle relied on that scared a lot of the readers of this book. And after this conversation with an engineer, familiar with the grid, I felt a lot more at ease about some of the protections in place. So,
I mean, but to play like the advocate of the writer, like it is fiction, and
sure.
I mean, but I guess we do appreciate these novels because of the reality, that they and the research that they put into it. So I'm not gonna. I don't know. I want to back Kyle here and say he did do his research, and based off of what we read, something like that could have happened.
Sure, could have happened. But let me talk to you about some of the things that our guest explained.
All right.
I started off by saying, so are the basic facts correct that we're looking at around 55,000 substations across the country, and that you would only need to attack maybe 9 nodes or so where the grid interconnects to be able to take down the whole thing? And the immediate answer to that was absolutely not. It was a clear, there's no way there are 9 interconnected nodes that if those are down, the entire U.S. grid could go down. Part of the best protection that Mike, by the way, was our guest, that Mike explained was how the grid is so balkanized in that, thinking of the Balkans as a region in Southeast Europe, a bunch of little countries, each kind of running the show on their own since the breakup of Yugoslavia. He said, the utility grid, there might be 55,000 substations, and they're coordinated by over 3,000 different utility companies or regional power authorities, and they're not necessarily talking to one another. In some cases, their actual grids are so distinct from ones just a few miles away. They may be able to connect for possible emergency situations to support one another to bring power to the different parts of that regional grid, but in terms of safety and security, they could very easily be disconnected, and they may even run on different systems where it can't necessarily talk to the other. But
so in the novel, he says that you just need to hit 9, but I'm pretty sure he had a list of more than 9, and they got some of them obviously got captured because, Mitch was on his trail and he was sitting at one of the ones that he thought was going to be attacked. But So you got to guess that they're hitting weight. They're just the men are just going and going and going until they get captured or get killed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we ever, I can't remember specifically, but we don't ever actually know how many men that ISIS had in the United States.
That's
So
true. I think, though, to that point,
it was way more. Yes, the physical attack was important aspect of it.
mm-hmm.
But I think the cyber attack and the overloading
Yep.
was way more important.
Yeah, and we'll get to that because Mike also had some experience in the cybersecurity behind the grid. Not as much, but some. Remember, he was an engineer. But here's one other point just to that. He mentioned these 3 interconnects, and he said you can find maps of them, and he gave me a couple of websites. And these interconnects are these deliberately separated systems and these points at which you could disconnect them if needed. So if there is any sort of connection nationwide from grid to grid, he said there's 3 distinct interconnects, an eastern, a western, and of course, this is America, Texas has its own. But
that comes into play, right? Because that's why Power Station believes that Texas is like a little bit separate.
Exactly.
That's why he believes in the trap.
And so that's true. That is true that Texas would be able to maybe get back up and running faster because it's its own interconnect was the word he used in the industry. But he said this can also work as a fail-safe. So even if one were to go down, there are these fail-safe interconnects where it would have absolutely no effect on the other 2/3. So there could be a fail-safe where one cuts off and is completely separated from the others. So it's another way to balkanize the system so that an attack in one region might not necessarily affect the other regions.
Okay.
Of course, you're right, though. Could you then flip that on its head and use those as the means to attack? Sure, but he said it really would work as a fail-safe. So complete national power loss it was so far out of his thinking he couldn't even rationalize it. But here's the bigger reason is he wanted to talk about how prepared the industry is in their response. And he said it's well known across any sort of government oversight boards when they come into interagency meetings, power and electricity is way beyond in terms of emergency planning and protection. He said things like from water or communications or transportation, he said electrical utilities always get shouted out as having the best emergency plans in place. And he said a lot of them do drills very regularly, and they ask questions like, well, he actually said at one point the Department of Energy came in and public regulatory commissions have gone to state boards and they said, we are going to demand how many hours is acceptable. If there's power loss, even on a grand scale, he goes, you have to have plans in place and practiced 48 to 72 hours, or at least emergency power for critical infrastructure.
But if you can't get those substations because they're, like what Kyle says, because obviously they were taking out the ones that were so highly specialized.
Yep.
So that's why I think this attack, yes, I do agree, but like the attack was planned pretty precisely. He knew what he was doing, and he knew he was probably the ones, even if he was, let's say there's not 9 that are like critically important to cut the power, but let's attack the ones that are so highly specialized that we don't have a backup for, that we would have to order, and we can't get that in. And then, like, I guess all of these situations that they probably plan for, they're not planning for blanket nationwide power outage, because Rap can't contact people. Rap can with like his special satellite phone, or I don't even know I forget what they're using. What are they using? Are they using satellite phones?
Yeah, they probably have some sort of satellite phone. Yeah, but about the spare transformers, I asked him about that. I said a big component of the plot is places that the transformers are so specially made, you can't get a new one up and running. And he pointed me to the STEP program, and I looked it up. It's the STEP, the Spare Transformer Equipment Program. And okay. he said if you look at every major substation, so if there were these 9 that were so critical, he said there is a 100% chance that they have spare transformers ready to go. They have transportation plans. He even said most of your major utility companies, and we were talking about your LA or your Houston or New York, he He said they would have fleets of backups available. He said already loaded oftentimes on flatbed trucks, sometimes on train rails, and they have an emergency plan that's a 48 to 72 hour plan that includes the transportation. He told me one story working somewhere in the Northeast region where they did lose power, and he said they instituted a plan that within hours the entire highways were shut down, even major highways. They had a plan to redirect traffic to set up one of these emergency transformers, and they actually had to close the highway for 3 months just to keep the emergency transformer up and running. And he said they did it. They had traffic redirected. It was kind of a pain in that regard, but the plan was there, and this emergency transformer ran for 3 full months to provide power as normal. So at least if we're talking about the major substations, like the ones in the book that bring down the grid, felt pretty confident that this spare transformer program, and you can read about it on the Edison Electric Institute website, is well prepared with emergency plans in place. So these things have been considered. And he actually said at one point,
the senator. You sound very much like the senator that is arguing back against these upgrades. I would pose that as like, this guy sounds like the people on the Hill who don't want to upgrade the power system.
Well, even if you get those cranky senators, let me point you to a couple other organizations that Mike mentioned. And the biggest one, he told me, was founded in 1963-64. It's called NERC, N-E-R-C, the North American Reliability Electric Corporation. And he said they were actually founded after the reverse of what you're saying. It was a threat from the federal government in the 60s that said, either you fix these issues, you come up with emergency plans, or they even threatened to have the Department of Energy take over. And he said, we are going to nationalize the grid if we feel you do not have proper plans in place and protection. Ever since the 60s, NERC, the North American Reliability Electric Corporation, was created to avoid that, so that the grid can be privatized and can still run with regulation, but not nationalization. Well, actually, I went on the website, and the mission stated on NERC's website is to meet the critical infrastructure protection standards, to assure the effective and efficient reduction of risks to the reliability and security of the grid. And NERC, you can also read about these exercises. He was telling me they run what's called the Grid X exercises. So grid, G-R-I-D, X, the letter X. And they have these conferences every once in a while where they actually war game out these scenarios. They purposefully create a scenario that breaks the electric system, probably similar to what we saw in the book. And he said they already have planned out bringing large utilities together to get them involved. The people who participate in these are federal, state, municipal. They even bring in the water authority folks, gas companies, electric utilities. And he said all the utilities are talking amongst themselves in these scenarios, and they're talking with both federal, state, and municipal overseers. And I went on the website, and one of the more recent GridX events had more than 100 executives from the electricity industry, cross-sector partners from other utilities, and government representatives attending. It included someone from the National Security Council, the Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security, the Transportation Security Administration, FEMA, the Department of Defense, the FBI, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, in addition to all the major utility companies across the country. And they actually do exercises in exactly what we're talking about.
But what if, I guess the main thing to poke a hole in this would be they would have to have very specific things put in place, because obviously the communication is going to be gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Only the people who can get to that bunker, wherever it is, that with the president is going to have communications with each other. So before anything happens, they have to have strict, like, a flow chart of like, this happens, then we immediately do this. And, if we can't get a hold of somebody, we roll with it, because if not, because there's going to be mass chaos,
Of course.
But one of the main things with the plot was that it triggered a lot of fires, and it also, you have the whole water loss threat. Yeah. So there's other things that are come into play, that it's not just power that they have. Like,
yep.
When you have like a local blackout, like the Northeast is blacked out. Most of the time it's not because there's these mass fires that people are also dealing with, and because you're worried about the loss of water because no one has power. Like all that elevates hysteria, which then adds another element to it that I think, I don't know, I would argue that I don't think people have these strict, if X happens we do Z. Mm-hmm. Or we do Y, or we do Y and Z, type thing.
I was really glad to hear that Mike actually did feel that way. Maybe not like you're describing like individual family plans. Like still, I don't know what the hell I would do in this situation. And total power scared the crap out of me thinking, what the heck would I do? But he did give me some assurances that the managers of these utilities have already thought these issues through. Of course, they can't get every attack right. But he said in terms of the industries wanting to be ahead of the game with emergency plans and anticipate issues, he said it would be naive to think the major utility companies, the ones that could affect large populations in urban areas, it would be naive to think that they do not have these plans in place. And he said, working for over 3 decades in the industry, his confidence level was really high that there's a 48 to 72 hour window that in emergency situations that involve a physical attack, they can get them up and running. Now, obviously,
let's go to the cyber.
Obviously, we've seen things a little longer than that. Also, before we do that, though, you mentioned the water loss and the wildfire threats. I asked Mike, I said, they play a big role in creating chaos in the book, particularly when the water can no longer be pumped. And again, he had the confidence to say, I've practiced scenarios losing power to water plants and pumping stations. And he said, part of the electric industry plans how to get those up and running within that time frame in an emergency situation. He said, a lot of the leaders in utility emergency management, they almost act, or they have background in military. They act with resilience and have degrees in disaster planning. And he said, even more so than protecting substations, water power plants often have 2, 3, or 4 generators on site so that they can keep pumping. He even said there's a very close relationship between power companies and water utility. He said there's been times where power companies actually have asked the water utility to provide additional power. Whether the power company in the substation is not producing enough or they're not at peak capacity for whatever reason, he had some situations where the generation capacity at a water utility was enough to feed the power company surplus energy so the power company can provide it to customers and consumers. Like, that's how close they work together, that the generators are so strong at a lot of the water plants, they could supply energy even to the power companies, which to me was like, wow. I feel pretty confident then that we have a backup, or at least we have these utilities talking to one another.
But I think, again, it's that whole 48 to 72 hour window, right? If you can't meet that, mm-hmm. if you master an attack that can get over that hump, then I think everyone is screwed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We also know how many times, think your job, right? Or even think your family. How many times did you have an emergency plan, and then when shit hits the fan, you realize very quickly that plan does not apply?
Yeah.
Either you don't have the organizational structure to implement it, or it just, you didn't plan for the right thing. So, yeah, you're right. You mentioned wildfires. I asked him about that. He said, again, he has confidence that the professionals he worked with, who actually have degrees in this thing, and he's only been on the East Coast, but he said he's been in some conversations and knows that folks who do oversee or manage and regulate utility companies in dry areas, think of your Californias, he said very often they would have fire jumper teams. He said he knows of some power utilities that are the ones whose budget goes towards forest fire suppression and fire jumpers, and they're even trained by the power utility managers. And so he said a lot of companies have already anticipated that if it's a high need region for that concern. Now, he said if you surge areas and you don't properly manage them, you don't cut back the brush from the wires, and you're not doing proper forest management on your lines, sure, that could lead to a pretty bad fire in dry conditions. But again, he said plans are in place to properly manage power lines and clear them out. Who knows with budget cuts if that's one of the first things to go? You know, why would you hire teams to cut down trees when, you know, you're barely trying to hang on financially in a recession or a crisis? But any well-run utility company is putting funding into those things already, clearing power lines of debris, and if necessary, training fire suppression teams. So I did bring that up with him. And again, a high level of confidence. Of course, we all have confidence, and then that's why it's called an emergency, right? As something comes out of the blue. But it was good to hear that someone who actually has years of experience in the field felt that strongly about the events of the book, not necessarily having to worry about them coming true wholesale.
Yeah, it gives me a little bit of confidence, but I still think that like the cyber attack is the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we do have a lot of, I'm hoping these companies have, because the only way he was able to get in was because he was given access, like that. And
Yeah.
I guess we don't really know how he is. Power Station John Alton is smart. Is he a master code breaker? I mean, obviously he created a worm, but like he was given access.
Sure.
Because he had to. He was told, all right, poke and prod, see where our weaknesses are. Sorry. And without that, would he have been able to have the knowledge to get in? I don't think so. I don't think he's that smart.
So that's a good point. We talked a little bit about a possible cyber attack, but more because you and I had discussed an EMP attack or a disturbance that affects the communications grid. And Mike actually pointed me towards the EPRI, which is, again, another one of these organizations that runs the Black Sky program. And I was like, ooh, a sexy name. That'll be good for the podcast. Kind of like, ooh, very like spooky stuff. But what the Black Sky program was, basically I looked up this exercise, and it's part of the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council. So again, another council that is putting plans into place for emergency response. And he said it's made up of utilities CEOs, people on R&D committees related to electrical engineering, and even communications experts in the energy management systems. So basically, again, it was another council that does convene these emergency disaster scenarios, and the Black Sky is particularly if there's a disruption to communications in our due to atmospheric events like an EMP. And so he cited an example of he was working, in New York, and how New York came together with Dominion Power, in Virginia in the Mid-Atlantic, and there was a Canadian company involved. And the federal government basically said, part of your exercise is to plan communications. That's why we have an international Canadian company, a Mid-Atlantic, and a Northeast company to basically plan in a Black Sky event. What would you do to keep communications open as you try to get the grid together? And that same thing happens. Yeah, go ahead.
I think you're putting too much stock into our government and our government readiness, and you're putting too much trust in them that they would have the full planning. I mean, at the same time, we like the CIA. We like Mitch Rapp and the idea that the CIA would have that. So I guess we're putting stock in that as well. But I don't know. It's just, in this situation, Alton was in the prime position to perform this attack because he was. If we're just looking at like, is the book plausible?
Yeah.
Not necessarily like, is this attack plausible, but like Alton was the perfect character to perform this attack because one, he was smart, smart enough to do something like this. Two, he had the ambition to do something like this. Three, his circumstances allowed him to do something like this.
It's true.
It's like the president. If I shouldn't say that. It's like if the CEO of the company wanted to take it down, they're in the prime position to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I guess that will go back.
It's different than a worker who wanted to take down the company. They'd have to figure out, I don't know.
Sure. Does that go back, though, to the initial point? Because that's how we wrapped up, saying that the reason why Mike concluded the events as I was laying them out, from the plot of Total Power are highly unlikely The main one was that no one individual can have that power to access that many systems, both kinetically with a physical attack, but also through cybersecurity, simply because of how varied the connections are. His main thing was how balkanized, close to 3,000 different utilities. And on top of that, a number of other commissions that meet and put in emergency plans. Because there's so many protections built in, just the way the system's designed, felt it was very likely that you can bring down the whole thing. And particularly unlikely that 9 attacks, physical attacks, would be enough to do it.
Well, that's definitely reassuring. That there's not just 9. There's not just 9 places that have barbed wire fence. Yeah. That if I went and got my 9 best buddies to go take it down, that wouldn't work. But I do think you have to be, and obviously this is a work of fiction, but you have to obviously the author or Kyle has put Power Station Alton in the situation to have access to this disjointed, balkanized system.
Yeah. So
that's why it's able to work. So I still believe in the plot.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt Kyle crafted that story and the plot checks out. We just thought it's important to bring to you, the listeners, an alternate perspective. And I got to say, I was satisfied with my talk with Mike, just reassured in some way. But at the same time, doesn't mean I completely agree with him, and completely throw out the other research that both we've done and Kyle's done. You got to be somewhere in the middle. But I think important to share with you guys that perspective as well.
No, I think it's helpful because, one, after reading the book and after doing our own little research before we even discussed the book, it really made me feel vulnerable. And especially after Kyle predicted a pandemic, or
right.
Not predicted, but talked about a pandemic, and then we had one. It made me feel, I don't know, very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And after talking to you, learning what you learned, there are actually people thinking about this. Yes, we probably put too much stock in our government that they're going to actually have a plan, but I do think in the book it's a very particular situation.
Yeah. Well, how about we wrap up with, actually, this was probably my favorite part of talking to Mike in the interview, and it was probably the most Flynnian as well. That's our word we coined, is very Flynnian. Mike participated in a congressional investigation, and as he's telling me this, I just couldn't stop thinking of my favorite scenes of Mitch Rapp are sometimes when he's in a conference room or when Kennedy's in front of a congressional committee. This story, I was like straight out of the book. So he said he was called working for some utility, and he was called to a congressional investigation of some events surrounding the power grid. And he was straight up asked by a snarky congressman. He forgets if it was a congressional committee or a senatorial committee, but he was asked, will our generation stations be able to withstand a 747? What if tomorrow a plane struck one of your generation stations? And he said this congressman was trying to corner him and say see, look, you wouldn't know what to do. And he turns to his partner. In his mind, he's thinking, what kind of fucking question is that? And his partner leans into the microphone, who he's testifying with, and goes, well, isn't that your job? The job of the federal government to make sure planes don't go down in the first place? That is exactly what would happen in one of these. Janice Crane could have shot that right back.
Oh yeah.
She would have had that line right on the tip of her tongue, ready, and Alton would have been sitting there cracking up, backbenching off to the side.
Or even you could see a congressman saying something to Mitch or Irene, and them coming back with something like that.
Yeah. Well, we hope you found this interesting, kind of to see an alternate point of view. We just watched the debate the other day. I think it's super important that we all be ready to look at both sides of an issue. And so when I talked to Mike, I thought it was important to put that out on the podcast for you all, so you can see an alternative perspective on the events of Total Power.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, that was fun.
Well, Chris, what is coming next week?
All right. So finally, October, we're going to discuss Separation of Power Part 1. We liked the format that we did for Total Power, so I think we're going to stick with it. We're going to talk about the first half, which I think is up to chapter 23. right? We talked about that.
Yep.
And then the week after, we'll finish up with the second half of Separation of Power. So yeah, and then just to give an update for the rest of the year, we're going to be doing Separation of Power, Executive Power, and then Memorial Day to wrap up the new year. So I'm excited to discuss these next couple of books. It's nice to it was nice to like do some new books, and now we're getting back to some oldies, and we're getting into like the meat.
Yes.
The meat. Yeah, we weren't so high on Third Option, but we love Transfer of Power. But I think we're going to get in. Like, I love Memorial Day. I love Memorial Day. I think, and then we're going to get to Consent to Kill. Like, I'm excited.
We're going to kick off, like, on our theme of 2021. It's going to be a good start to the new year.
When is Consent to Kill?
So
is it February or January?
We end the year with Memorial Day, so that means within the first couple of months of 2021, we're getting there. And then shortly after that, we'll get to American Assassin a few months down the road.
Ooh,
yep.
Nice.
Yep. We got a couple of ideas planned, particularly around American Assassin, but a couple other interviews and things along the way. We've been waiting for some of these books to come up. So it was nice doing Lethal Agent and Total Power, getting a little Kyle Mills involved. But I'm excited to get back to old school Vince, right where he was hitting his stride too. Like if Term Limits created the universe, sans Mitch, Transfer of Power, then drop Mitch into it. Third Option was kind of setting the stage of him as a spy. Separation of Power, it's game on. He is at the pinnacle of his career, ready to go.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Right. So we got to thank our patrons. Special shout out to our special operator Sherry F, and great shout out to our special agents Matt, Roman, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, and Jeff.
Yes, and look for your stickers, your new nice vinyl Mitch Rap Pod stickers coming in the mail over the next few weeks.
Looking hot.
Yes, sir.
And please, 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 we can't say this enough, subscribe, rate, and review us using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at mitchrappod.com or using our Twitter handle at mitchrappod. Same thing on Instagram. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.